This man went from making electric BMWs in his garage to building some of the maddest road cars ever made. And all before the age of 30. This is Mate and his Rimacs. The Rimac family, along with their 3-year-old mate, as in the guy's name, not the British slang term for friend, moved from their native Bosnia to Germany at the start of the Bosnian Civil War in 1991, and mate lived there until 2000 when he moved to Croatia. And it was in Croatia, at their high school, one of his teachers, Ivan Vlanic, encouraged him to enter a local robotics competition because he seemed like a smart guy. And with his knowledge and passion for the subject, mate won. That started him on a journey that led him all the way to representing Croatia in the global electronics competition. And then at just age 17, he applied for a patent for his award-winning rear-view mirror blind spot reduction system. That is a hell of a CV before you can get to legal drinking age. Now that background establishes that Mate is a very clever, very smart guy. But he also likes cars. In fact, he bought an E30 BMW 3 Series for drifting at just 18 to get into racing for cheap. Then his engine exploded. Most would buy a new car and try again, but not Rimac. He saw that battery technology was beginning to appear in the auto industry and wanted to try it out, so he electrified his BMW and called it the EM3. Personally, I would have called it the ME, because it's like the mechanical engineering and it's electric, and then you put the 3 backward. I don't know. It still works. EM3 works fine. The same could not be said about the EM3 itself. The original electric motor was unbalanced and had a very limited range, so he and his team of friends worked out of his garage on weekends to rebuild the old 3 Series inside out with brand new parts until he had the Green Monster. 600 horsepower, 663 torque, homemade electric sports car that proceeded to shatter several FIA electric car speed records, including a 0 to 60 of 3.3 seconds and a standing mile time of just 35 seconds. The EM3 turned a lot of heads. It was an incredible accomplishment for such a young inventor, and it got so much attention and publicity and people wanting him to do that to their 3 Series. He created his own electric conversion shop called VST, of course standing for the mathematical formula for speed, velocity equals displacement divided by time, but it's not like I know that by heart or anything. VST eventually would turn into Rimac Automobile in 2009, and he realized that the EM3, now on its 5th redesign, wasn't a BMW anymore. So Mate decided to build a car from scratch since he was pretty much already at that stage. Now most wannabe car makers would try a hatchback, a sedan, maybe an entry-level sports car. But Rimac wanted to dream a little bigger, and began speccing out and rendering an all-electric hypercar. But things went wrong very fast. You can't just jump into the hypercar market at less than 20. You see, if you want to make a car that scale, or make any car for that matter, you need a lot of funding. And he secured quite a bit of funding from some Middle Eastern investors, who then turned on him and said if the company didn't move to the Middle East, the funding would be cut. Well, he didn't want to do that, so the funding was cut. But he still wanted to launch his car company, so he desperately tried to keep it solvent by putting the hypercar on the back burner and made Rimac design electric components for several automakers, including Koenigsegg. It certainly wasn't his dream, but being a parts supplier paid off, and pretty soon several large companies began investing in Rimac, such as Hyundai, Kia, and most notably, Porsche. With a stable platform finally, the Rimac Concept 1 was unveiled in 2011. It was a luxurious, battery-powered hypercar with fancy leather upholstery, which means that even with carbon fiber construction, it weighed over 4,000 pounds. But that almost didn't matter because when it has 4 electric motors, one on each wheel, delivering 1,224 horsepower to the road, it's still really fast. 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds, and even more impressively, 0 to 186 in 14 seconds, with an electronically limited top speed of 221 miles an hour. It was the first proper electric hypercar, and it single-handedly upended the hypercar market. You could go for an even faster version if you were a maniac, called the Concept S, which had 110 pounds removed, racing slick tires, a full aero kit, a racing interior. Oh, and 1,400 horsepower. Near enough. But it's unlikely that you could ever get one of those because they only made 2 of them. But hey, at least there's 8 of the normal Concept ones that you can potentially buy. Okay, 7 potential Concept ones you could buy. And unlike most hypercars, which cruise around Monaco at 5 miles an hour, the Concept 1 actually raced. It broke the EV speed record at a timed track when it ran the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and in 2015 a modified 1,500 horsepower version called the E-Runner finished 2nd overall at the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. But that would be Rimac's only car. Their business was still primarily being a supplier. The second car would have to wait until 2018, called the Nevera. If the Concept 1 was a wake-up to the hypercar industry, the Nevera was the sledgehammer, busting down their door, because the range increased from 200 miles to 340, the styling was more aggressive, and the car was even more quick. The C1 was already quick, with a 2.4 second 0 to 60. No one considers that slow. But the Nevera, just under 1.9 seconds to 60, and the 0 to 186 dropped down to under 10 seconds with a top speed in excess of 250. This car does 0 to 186 miles an hour, faster than a Ford EcoSport does 0 to 60. That's just stupid. And it's all because of the batteries. It's the second biggest battery pack ever made for a road car at 120 kilovolts. And when you combine that with the brand new set of 4 electric motors, it makes 1,914 horsepower and 1,740 foot-pounds of torque. That is a number so ridiculously high you can't even fathom it properly. Just like how it recently did a quarter-mile time of 8.6 seconds. It's a ludicrous car that even Mate himself says is quite frankly unnecessary. This is his quote. If it was about what people needed, everyone would drive a Skoda Octavia. Those are words to live by. That is awesome that he said that. And once again, like the Concept 1, this did not follow the traditional hypercar approach. It's a proper car that's got active aero and torque vectoring, which means it can handle very well once you accept the murderous speed, and it has luggage space since it's electric. And even though it's $2.4 million, Rimac still has some cheeky fun with it. Whether it's the champagne that comes as standard in the trunk, the fire extinguisher reading in case of hill climb extinguish fire, or the fact that Mate himself, the CEO, took one of the crash test cars rallying around Rimac's unfinished facility. With their name only growing bigger, Rimac's future seems pretty safe. And Mate clearly agrees because they just bought a 55% stock stake in Bugatti. You don't just throw that kind of money around and become Rimac Bugatti on a whim. That is commitment and that is planning. And it worked. Their parts are not just being used in some of the greatest sports car and hypercars in the world right now. They're also licensing the Nevera's underpinnings, Pininfarina, for their new Battista electric hypercar. And Rimac is planning on expanding out from the automotive market. They're working on an autonomous car, a hovercraft, and the world's fastest electric yachts. If that does not sum up the potentially bright future for Rimac and his mate, I don't know what will.